All right. Bizhan, Jake. um, how do you set yourself up for creativity? Like, what do you do when you first start to get in like your creative process?
To get in the creative zone,
Yeah.
that's a really difficult thing to answer. I don't think that there's anything. I know that a lot of people have different rituals or meditate or something of that nature, but for me, it's it's kind of different. I feel like a lot of the ideas or the solutions to projects come when I least expect it. But I do know that if I'm having difficulty solving a problem, sometimes it helps a lot for me to go exercise. Like, that's always been a really good go-to for me if I'm getting really frustrated with the project, because it forces me to stop thinking about the specific problem I'm trying to solve and just kind of clear the air. So it might be going on a run. It might be, I have a boxing bag in my house that I'll might do some rounds on the boxing bag. Something to kind of clear my head.
When it comes to working, do you prefer to like work by yourself or do you prefer to work with a group?
It depends. I mean, like, I do enjoy working by myself because it's a little bit easier, but I enjoy the input of having multiple people on a project. However, it depends on, that group. If somebody isn't pulling their weight, or they, aren't submitting things in a timely manner, it makes for a really negative experience. So, I wouldn't say that there's one that I prefer over the other. It's a matter of there's pluses and minuses to both situations. Like, not being able to have an outside opinion when you're doing something, it's very easy to get immersed in it and to not realize that something isn't communicating effectively or something doesn't look right because you're the only person staring at it. There's not really any other filter.
Okay. Is there anything specifically that has inspired you? Like, you look at certain things and you might get an idea from it, or
Yeah, all the time. But I mean I think that's just something that all creatives should be just hyper aware of their environment. So, like, it could be something really benign that inspires me, or it could be another creative's work. It just depends. Like, the pattern of ceiling tile might inspire me, but as much as like a film or a musician's work or another creative's work. So I wouldn't say that there's anything specific. It's just, everything. The world's a pretty amazing place. I think that there's a video that I showed in Curiousness where Milton Glaser talking about the people losing interest and becoming bored after the first act, both in their personal lives and their creative lives, and how that's unfortunate because the world's an astonishing place. And I'd agree that there can be inspiration found in everything. And I know it sounds corny. It's pretty, like, so many people say that, but I think it's literally true. Whether it's like, you're staring down and you see all these mushrooms growing in this, like, some rotting wood in the gutter, and you're like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. Like, I wonder, what's the process of it? Why'd they grow that way? Who left that board? And that could then lead to something else that as far as like something process driven or something visually driven. It could be like color or patterning, or just the way that they visually are spread out on the mushrooms are visually spread out on the ground, could be an interesting point of departure for the way that type is laid out, or visual elements are laid out on a page, or it could be any number of things that could come up with that. Something so inane that you would typically overlook. And I think that's the most important thing for creatives is to be hypersensitive to the world around them, to recognize patterns. Probably the most valuable thing that anybody in any field of study should pay attention to, whether that's social behaviors or natural patterns or visual metaphors we use, and signs and symbols, the way that we interact with the world around us, or people do, things that are specific culturally to the society that you're living in, or the subcultures that you're surrounded by.
okay. Let's see. No, you already answered that one. Do you prefer any specific way when it comes to like do you prefer like drawing over writing over possibly like doing a video or acting anything out? Do you prefer any specific way to express your like creativity?
I mean, there's things that I feel the most confident in doing. Like I feel the most confident with illustration and design and typography. I don't really consider myself much of a writer, so I'm not as comfortable in it. That's not to say that I don't enjoy it.
Okay. What helps you most with being creative? Is it just go back to the like keeping your eyes open and just having the inspiration hit you, or is there anything specifically that you like to do to keep yourself looking for the stuff around you?
I guess like just with anything, like creativity is like a muscle that you can exercise, and so what really harms it is being in a very mundane job and doing very mundane acts, doing things that are repetitive, that are monotonous. You know, those kinds of things really, I think, kill creativity. So trying to break out of that, and you can find interest in that. You can always find interest in the mundane. You can find interest in things that are monotonous, yes. I mean, but it is incredibly more difficult than if you have the ability to change perspective. Also, when people say no to you, I think that's really another thing that really kills creativity. So when you're saying you can't do that, you can't do this, you know, we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that, to a degree. Like, you know, I think that restrictions can lead to creativity, but there's a point in which there are so many restrictions. There's that threshold that like it prevents any sort of creative thought or visual problem solving.
Okay. All right. That was good there. What's your favorite part of the creative? I guess not creative process, but I guess what's the most rewarding part of it to you that you enjoy the most and get the most
For
out
me,
of?
I guess it's not like the every time in the process, but I really live for those moments when I produce something that I'm surprised that I made. You know, when you make something, you're like, I can't believe that I came up with that idea and executed it so well. You know, because I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist, but I usually am not very astonished by what I produce. So when I do produce something that I'm myself is also astonished by, you know, that's, you know, it's a really great feeling. And I'd say also the response of the audience that you present it for when it's successful for the audience that you were targeting for the project, or when the client is really, you know, in my case, when the client is really happy and appreciative of what you do, that's also, you know, something that's definitely very rewarding.
All right. It's kind of a good pat on the back, makes you feel good every now and
Yeah,
then.
exactly. And also when you find yourself progressing within your craft, like when you become better and you can recognize that and like, oh, I can finally do this, you know?
Makes sense.
It's like kind of like to use an analogy, I used to skateboard a lot, and it's like when you can like finally land that trick, you know, it's kind of the same kind of thing. It's like, oh, I finally, you know, the first time that you're ever able to ollie is like this amazing, you know, feeling. And I feel like the same thing is true when you're trying to produce a certain technique. And for people who don't, you know, since it's going to be posted, for those who don't know what ollie is how you jump on a skateboard. It's the name of basically like the trick that allows you to jump on a skateboard. But yeah.
All right. What keeps you going to get new ideas, and rather than, like you said earlier, getting burnt out? And some people may just get lost in it and be like, man, I don't feel like doing that anymore. What keeps you just driving to do new things?